welcome to our weekly discussion, Moral Side of the News. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. Joining me today, as always, a distinguished panel. Father Joe Graffis, the Archdiocese of Louisville. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Reverend Jason Crosby, Chaplain, Center College. Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ. And Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. It's a report that's been more than a half year in the making. An audit from the JCPS transportation meltdown last August was one of this week's top local stories.
This report says that during the summer of 2023, Alpha Route, the company that JCPS hired to design the routes, was routinely missing deadlines and also making changes that made some of the routes unsafe. The report also faults the district for not having a healthy workplace environment where people felt comfortable to raise the alarm.
Kindergartners were going to the bathroom on the bus because they were there for so long.
Memories of the first day still fresh for many parents. The school board voluntarily asked for an audit, and on Monday, Prismatic Services from North Carolina released Phase 1. Prismatic emphasizes that JCPS tried to do 3 new things on August 9th, a new school choice plan, a new 9-bell system, and new bus routes designed by Alpha Route. The audit says the Transportation Department was not directly involved in the school choice plan and didn't weigh in on how it would impact the number of buses needed. Prismatic pointed out the unrealistic and sometimes unsafe changes Alpha Route made after getting parameters from the district. When modeling the routes, JCPS suggested 10 seconds for each student loading and unloading. Alpha Route cut it to 5 seconds. JCPS suggested no student ride more than 60 minutes. Alpha Route changed it to 70 minutes for non-magnet and 90 minutes for magnet students. Prismatic also included screenshots of complicated routes and times where students had to cross 4-lane roads without sidewalks. When we asked JCPS if it was still using Alpha Route, a spokesperson said, "We are not using Alpha Route." In January, the Board of Education approved the establishment of a routing team for JCPS. We have hired 6 employees whose job is to establish transportation routes for next school year. The report also said many JCPS employees knew the first day of school would have issues, but there was a, quote, negative environment in the central office that discouraged questions.
Panel, there's a lot to unpack, a lot of failure points from this audit that was conducted by the JCPS School Board. How do you see this playing out from here?
A total disaster from here forward, particularly with them talking about eliminating other bus routes, particularly for magnet schools and traditional schools. Without the bus transportation, then those children that are black and brown are going to be the ones that feel that the most because of the lack of transportation. And so I am hoping that they will come up with another plan. But, you know, with the lack of time in doing that, I believe that it will probably just end up being another year of disaster. And then the other issue with this is that for after-school programming and all of the 9 bells, it is a disaster. Because of children being released at different times, then it is very difficult to have a cohesive tutoring program for the children. So it's, in my mind, it's just a total disaster.
It seems like public education has been under assault, sadly, through our state legislature that should be mandated to help strengthen public education.
Yes.
And they're concentrating on some things through the legislature and through some of these bills that I think make no sense and do not help children, do not help families, and do not strengthen education in any way.
I think the key element in this busing thing has been, obviously, they don't have enough bus drivers. I mean, and that's kind of what caused the chaos to begin with. Some of that is funding. Some of that is just not having people wanting to do a very difficult job. I think that was known even before all this plan started. There were some of us about other issues that I don't want to go into here. Said you're trying to do too much in this year. Some of the learning plans and curriculum changes going on at the same time. I said, you're just overwhelming teachers who are already overwhelmed. And this is going to be a disaster. Obviously, the busing one is the most obvious disaster, but I think teachers have been under enormous pressure in lots of other areas, and this just tops it off. And then parents, how do you know when to pick up your kids, not pick up your kids, what school, all this time changes and all that kind of stuff. And work schedules didn't seem to be cognizant of what parents are going through to get their kids to the right school. So I don't know. I mean, everybody can blame everybody about this, but somebody did not think this through very well.
And in our information, it said something like 10,000 students that they don't have transportation for.
Right.
No, that's inexcusable. I mean, public transportation or public school is to be for all of those children. And as you say, there's some school districts that don't have 10,000 children, so something needs to be worked out. And I'm hopeful that the school board will recognize and work on this diligently to solve some of these problems.
Well, I just want to underscore, I think you all have hit the highlights, but just to underscore some of what you all have said thus far, through a personal lens, there are real challenges at the moment. We're recording this show, which will be aired on Sunday, on Thursday afternoon at roughly 1 o'clock, and from here I have to go pick up my daughter at 2:20. And this is how it has been all academic year, and that's a real challenge. I'm very fortunate in that in our household we have figured out ways to make it work, but it's really stressful. The staggered start times, including start times for elementary students that are released at 2:20, that's a lot of daylight for an 8, 9, 10-year-old to have post-school that parents have to provide activities or some sort of means to care for them for that duration of time, disruption to the workday. Those are all real challenges. I'm grateful that the school board did make the decision this past week to delay a vote on the discontinuation of providing busing for magnet schools. This is very complicated. I do know, again, viewing these myriad of issues through a personal lens, my son is a middle schooler. He's not the one that gets out at 2:20. He is released at 3:20 from his JCPS middle school, and he's in a magnet program, and he has shared anecdotes of his fellow classmates who have said that absent the option to be bused, they will not be able to attend that school next year. So it will affect 12-year-olds. It'll affect 13-year-olds that are in programs that are giving them significant opportunities, in particular black and brown children, most directly. So I'm not only reading the reports and seeing the data, I am hearing the anecdotes. And then one other anecdote to pass along. A good friend of mine who is a teacher at Central High School, and Central students were very involved in the conversation at the school board on Tuesday night. Grateful that there's the potential, or at least the proposal at the moment, that Central might be carved out as an oasis, I guess, where students could still be bused to the magnet program at Central. But the same reasoning and logic applies to all these other magnet programs as well. And the rationale behind keeping Central's busing intact is so that the programs that are unique to Central, that are offered there, again, that are disproportionately serving black and brown students, I mean, those programs will be gutted all across the district if there's discontinuation. And there's real concern among teachers, among students. So from the elementary school perspective to the middle school perspective to the high school perspective, in addition to the data that we've read, to the reports that we've read, it's really, really hitting home. I am optimistic and hopeful with the hiring of JCPS staff to deal with the routes, to recognize that Preston Highway at points, if you're sitting in an office and on the East Coast, in theory, that could be a drop-off point. But if you're crossing 4 lanes at Outer Loop and Preston Highway, that doesn't work.
Yep.
That doesn't work. So I'm optimistic and
And there
hopeful.
are a few other roads.
Yes,
like that
that's just
too.
one example of many. And I know it's complicated. I'm grateful that at this point things are delayed and other options are being explored.
Very good. Great discussion. Let's go on to topic number 2. The major national story this week, most significant story, was the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore after being struck by a container ship.
Tonight, the images shocking and devastating. A massive, nearly 1,000-foot cargo container ship losing power and ramming into Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. The 1.6 miles long bridge crashing down in just seconds, plunging into the Patapsco River overnight. Baltimore's mayor declaring a state of emergency. The Coast Guard, the NTSB, and the FBI all on the scene. The intense urgent search and rescue efforts underway, sonar detecting vehicles underwater. First responders, fire departments, and Coast Guard teams all rushing to the scene in the immediate aftermath. Rescuers finding 2 people alive, one of them hospitalized. 6 are still unaccounted for, all believed to be construction workers on the bridge at the time, working to repair potholes.
8 construction workers were on the bridge, according to the construction worker.
We pray for the construction workers who are on the Key Bridge, and we pray for everyone who has been touched by this tragedy.
Tonight, we're learning moments before the crash, the ship issued an urgent mayday, allowing quick-thinking police to block traffic on the bridge.
Hold all traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering.
The officers then planning to get the construction crew off that bridge before it collapsed.
The whole bridge just fell down. Start, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
The quick work of law enforcement who kept more vehicles from coming onto the bridge, they undoubtedly saved an innumerable amount of lives.
Video timestamps on this live stream footage showing the ship's lights went off at 1:24 a.m. before turning back on a minute later. Then thick black smoke begins pouring out of the top of the ship. 1:26 a.m., the power turning off again and then back on at 1:27. At 1:28 a.m., you can see the last cars driving over that bridge. And about 30 seconds later, the ship rams into one of the bridge's supports, bringing down the entire bridge. Officials say the ship was moving at 8 knots, roughly 9 miles per hour, much faster than they should have been. The pilot at the controls is currently undergoing post-accident drug and alcohol testing. It was a local pilot specializing in navigating the port, not part of the ship's crew driving the ship. The FBI saying a preliminary investigation suggests the crash was an accident and that there's no credible evidence of a terrorist attack.
So panel, a very tragic accident. It could have been a lot worse, it sounds like, after the quick reaction to the shut down the bridge, but it could have ramifications economically to us locally. The governor declared that, or didn't declare, but said that farmers in Kentucky will be impacted by the harbor being shut. So.
It's a major, I went to school in Baltimore, so I've been across that bridge a couple of times. It's a little scary to go across, even more now, but that's a huge harbor that is, it's not the largest on the East Coast, but it, you think of all the ships that are still can't get out, as well as ships can't get in, it's going to have some serious impact, and hopefully they can open up at least the channel and get rid of some of the bridge so that channel can be opened up, but it's going to be a mess. And we'll probably all have implications because of this, because of, I guess, cars and several different things that go into that particular port and out of that port. And of course, economically for the city of Baltimore is going to be really disastrous, because that's a huge factor there.
As tragic as it is, I keep thinking of 9/11, and if it had been later on 9/11, there would have been more people in the towers. As this occurred early in the morning, there was a lot less traffic and a lot of people were saved, and also the awareness of the police to take care of the issue as promptly as they did. It just, it's amazing that the whole bridge collapsed, but then there are all sorts of ramifications. There's more than just, this one ship hitting the bridge. There's all sorts, like the construction of the bridge, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure when they go around and do all the evaluations, they will come up with more than just one tragic incident.
I think it speaks to the amount of infrastructure work that needs to be done, not only on highways but bridges. You think in terms of the bridges here in Louisville that have had major repairs done. And so I'm glad that money is being allocated for that purpose now. And I think I also read that if this particular bridge had been reinforced up to today's standards, then perhaps this may not have happened. So I think we need to just do a better look at how we are dealing with infrastructure throughout the United States.
We got to make up for lost time. For so many years, the infrastructure was being ignored. And now we realize it's too late.
Yeah.
It gets to the point that I know folks who are nervous about driving to Indiana, which
I'm one of them.
And that shouldn't be the case. For so many years, we had a wonderful infrastructure, so what did we do? We took it for granted. We took it for granted, and it just fell into disrepair.
I had an experience years ago in Minneapolis. When the bridge collapsed there, I went across that bridge with some friends 2 days before it collapsed.
Oh, my.
And I mentioned this bridge. I said, this bridge looks like it needs a lot of work. And they said, oh, yeah, they're thinking about doing that. And then by the time I got back to Louisville, that bridge collapsed. But they rebuilt it in less than 18 months, which was amazing, considering, and this will take millions of dollars to do, but it's got to be done because that's a major artery around Baltimore and around the whole city there. But hopefully safety measures that we've skimped on need to be looked at.
What's fascinating to me about this one situation, tragic situation in Baltimore, is the way in which it pulls together so many threads and strands from around the globe. And it's a reminder to me of the global interconnectedness of our economy, the way in which technology has shrunk the world. If I'm not mistaken, those that lost their life were all construction workers, most of whom are from, I believe, Guatemala. So you have Guatemala and El Salvador, Central American construction workers filling the potholes on this bridge in Baltimore for a ship that was based out of Singapore or Malaysia, hits a bridge in the United States across the port of Baltimore. Our world's small, and it's very fragile, and certainly more in the loss of life, but it's just a reminder that we can get so focused on the world that we see around us on a daily basis here in Louisville or the Commonwealth of Kentucky that we can forget the ways in which economically and in other ways, relationally, we are so tightly connected at the moment.
What's sad too is some are politicizing this because of the very things that you just raised. You know, these people were from Central America, therefore are they legitimately here, even though some have been here 19 years and all that kind of stuff, or it's the ship, and you know, and that is incredibly sad to me that, you know, we're not facing the reality of what's really part of our world condition today.
And the reality, to me, the reality is there is a sin that these folks didn't have a path to citizenship, period.
Right.
Very good. Let's move on to topic number 3 for this week's Moral Side. Thanks for watching and listening. Library books overdue by 100 years were actually returned this past Monday. Take a look.
On behalf of the Perlmutter family, we proudly present to you and return to you those things that are rightfully yours.
Thank you.
Without barcodes to scan, checking in these old books was as much a formality as it was a family reunion.
I do remember our grandmother, Miriam.
Miriam Perlmutter checked out first Russian book in 1926, which translated Russian phrases into English. Inside, the stamped sleeve shows it was checked out from the Louisville Free Public Library. At the previous late fee of $0.25 a day, the returns would have cost around $15,000. But now the Free Public Library is even freer.
We don't have overdue fines anymore. No one is in trouble. And we're just so happy that they brought the books back. It makes it very special to hear their story.
The Russian Jewish immigrant was also known as Mary. She used that name on her well-stamped library card. That same card revealed where her downtown Louisville home was. It was here on 9th Street, well before Beecher Terrace apartments were ever built. She originally came to the U.S. from Ukraine with her husband and 2 children.
It's Easter Sunday. What a great story of forgiveness. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left.
I've known this family for about 50 years. And they're really Renaissance people. One of them, Mark Perlmutter, is a retired orthodontist, but he's also a musician. He has a klezmer band and does a lot of good things around the community. And this is the story. What we're seeing in microcosm is the first generation of an immigrant family, the second generation of an immigrant family, and beyond. And it's one of the good things about this country, the way, because in Russia, that family did not have opportunity whatsoever. In America, the opportunity was here, and they took advantage of it. And by taking advantage of it, they helped improve the world.
Well, what a great story for the Free Public Library. I mean, libraries have been under attack now for some time, and I think this is a great story. And that they wanted to come back and return the books, wow, that's just amazing. And that it was filmed and the presentation, the whole thing I think is just a really good story.
And the irony, too, of Russia being from Russia, or originally the Ukraine, and all that we see today in that situation, that, you know, we have roots that go back 100 years or more. And I think that does say something, too, about how we support Ukrainians and perhaps challenge our Russian brothers and sisters as well.
But it also speaks to the transformation of the community, because I think it said that they lived at 9th and Jefferson,
right,
where Beecher Terrace is located now. So it's gone from probably a European community at that time to a predominantly African American community now.
Well, and again, another thought that runs through my mind, connected to our previous story, it's a small world, right? And only getting smaller. And I think this is another example that illustrates that point. And then, yeah, I mean, I think one of the messages that can be conveyed, particularly for Christians at Easter, is even if all does seem lost, things can be found. And this little book, I wonder where else it has been, what else it has seen, who else has touched this book, what shelves it has sat upon over the course of the past century.
Yeah, I think it got out of town. They found it in one of the children or grandchildren's homes
in California.
In California,
Wow.
It got all the way back here or something like that. Glad they didn't have to pay a fine.
Yeah. Right.
And what this book taught. This book was a teacher, and to think of a book as a teacher, because there's more than just one way to learn. And I think, I wonder how often it was used and what an influence it had on the lives of that family.
I was struck by she immigrated from Russia and taught herself English. And,
Oh, yes.
you know, obviously that book was important to her, whether it got returned or not. It was
It was a lifeline.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then the $15,000 forgiveness.
Yeah, the $15,000 forgiveness
Yes.
with interest would have probably been, I can't do that math that fast. We have about a minute and a half left. Anything else you all want to talk about on the
I think
Wednesday?
for our religious traditions, can good come out of evil? And we certainly see a lot of evil in the world right now. And how can we as Christians and Jews repair the world, to use a Jewish term, which I love, that even in tragedy, as we've talked about tragedies today, that good can come out of this as we learn some things. Maybe when school busing, can good come out of this, that we can say, are we really being more sensitive to families and what they have to go through to get kids to school and what the kids have to go through? We have lots of issues, and sometimes we get distracted by non-issues in our time. And I think our religious traditions try to tell us, let's keep our eyes on the prize.
Thank you very much for wrapping it up for us, Father Joe, on this Easter Sunday. Thanks to our panel today, Father Joe Graffis, the Archdiocese of Louisville, Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, and Reverend Jason Crosby with Chaplain Center College. Thanks again for watching us this week on Moral Side of News. Join us again next week for an all-new episode. Until then, have a great Easter Sunday.